and then I will introduce you and we will be off and running. And then I will, all right. Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and today let's go to Islamabad, Pakistan, shall we? I've never been there before, but fortunately I have a friend who's in Islamabad in what looks like his home library. Most of my friends seem to have wonderful background bookcases. And so he's there with his cat, and we're going to have a nice visit. This is Professor Pervez Hoodbhoy, an old friend from Pugwash for me. And I want to get caught up because we had our last conversation, I think, for Peace Magazine in 2016. So we have quite a bit to get caught up with. Good morning, Pervez.
Good morning, actually evening here.
Oh, that's right. That's true. And it's even you're a day later. I've never been quite able to grasp the notion of somebody being on a different day for me. It's just one of those things that my brain doesn't process very well. But I'm sure that a good physicist will be able to explain it to me one of these days. All right. So nice to see you. And I'm going to plunge right in and ask you, since you've moved back to Islamabad, after teaching in Lahore for a number of years, I want to get caught up with how is life in Islamabad, and in particular, what's been going on in terms of the politics of your country internally. You are, of course, the most distinguished nuclear physicist in Pakistan, and somebody with a very deep knowledge of nuclear weapons. So I'm sure we'll get around to talking about nuclear weapons as well. But let's start off by having you bring me up to date on what has gone on internally in the politics, and then, of course, in Pakistan's relations with its neighbors, especially Afghanistan, India, and China. So, all right, now you've got your assignment. What all has happened there? You have yourself a football player prime minister, right?
Cricketer, not a football player.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, so I don't know where to begin, but let's begin with the situation in Afghanistan, which is a very dire one. The Taliban are taking over there. They've now attacked the cities, Lashkargah being under siege presently. Pakistan says that
right already you got me stumped. You're under a city under siege in Pakistan.
No. This is in Afghanistan. The Taliban have already taken over a lot of the countryside, whether it's 70% or 50%, I don't really know, because those figures are always contested. But it's the cities where the government has pulled back to, and which are going to be absolutely decisive, Kabul in particular. At the moment, one city is under serious siege, two others are also besieged, and it is expected, according to a US general, that it'll take 6 months for Kabul to fall. I hope that is wrong. The Taliban have for a long time been based partly inside Pakistan, and Pakistan over the years has supplied them, although it denies having supplied them. There is currently quite a flap because the former foreign minister of Canada accused Pakistan of harboring Taliban militants and sending them over to Afghanistan. And the Pakistan Foreign Office has very angrily retorted and said, absolutely not. We have no irons in the fire. We do not have our favorites there. And so all this is propaganda against Pakistan. But look, if the truth be told, and since we on the left insist on the truth being told, well, the fact is that, there's no doubt that there's a lot of ideological sympathy for the Taliban. In fact, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, is also known as Taliban Khan, and it's not an inappropriate term for him. So, although he is also the playboy who was at Oxford and had a lot of affairs with the royalty over there, and they all like to have their fun, but when they get older, then they become very religious, and so he's a born again Muslim, and he's not just born again, he's actually very virulent in his support for Islamism. So to call him Taliban Khan is not inappropriate. But actually,
I saw him interviewed by Judy Woodruff a couple of days ago. In fact, that sort of gave me the idea. I'd better call my friend Pervez to find out what's really going on, because she asked him all these questions about whether they'd been supplying the Taliban, and he denied it. And she asked him about he'd made some remarks about women, which she found offensive. That is, women were responsible for being, I don't think he put it this way, but by not covering up and so on, that naturally they would be sexually attacked. Who knows what would happen if they went around in street clothing. So, he tried to defend himself against that. I found him, you're right, one thing, he's a very attractive man. He's a very presentable speaker, and I could see why, the girls would go for him. Yeah, even in he's not a young man anymore, but he looks great. So, too bad.
Well, look, Meta, I'm not going to contest your perceptions, who you like, who you don't like. But this guy is incredibly backwards in terms of when it comes to women. He actually said that women invite rape because they dress that way. They incite women to attack them. And he's said this not once, but several times. So in the interview that you are referring to, he attempted to refute that, but well, we know better. He has, I don't want to go into his personal life, but look, that's irrelevant. The point is that he is very closely associated with the Pakistani military establishment. In fact, he came to power on their backs.
Oh.
So had it not been for the military establishment, he would most certainly not have been Prime Minister of Pakistan. The whole election was rigged. Here in Islamabad, there's a road out, there's the highway out there that I can see from my window. That was the conduit by which tens of thousands of workers, of paid people, were bussed into Islamabad, and they laid siege upon the Prime Minister's house, and they were there for months at an end. The police could not do anything. The police was under the control of the government of that time, but it couldn't do anything because the army, which is the decisive power in Pakistan, said, no, It's their democratic right. So they paralyzed the city. And then eventually, look, the previous government was corrupt, and I'm not trying to excuse them. Nawaz Sharif did. All politicians in Pakistan have been corrupt from day one. So he did get caught with the Panama scandal. However, that prime minister, Nawaz Sharif, had some elements of thoughtfulness, liberalism in him. So, for example, he wanted to make peace with India. And the army does not want peace with India. It wants a continued state of confrontation because that's good for the army. How else can you justify an army that's so huge that consumes such a major portion of the country's budget? And so ideologically, they're very tuned into Imran Khan, both in terms of his Islamism and pro-Talibanism, but also in terms of being very virulently against India.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm thinking, how much of a change is this? Because when we talked last in 2016, I think the point I came became most clear to me in your comments was that the army is one thing and the government is another thing. And the army has more power than the government. Well, it sounds as if now you're saying that the army has put in their government and they've got the whole shebang as a single cooperative entity. Is that the implication of what happened when they replaced, say, Nawaz Sharif with Imran Khan?
You're spot on that. Earlier on, we had martial law, and half of Pakistan's 75 years have been spent directly under military rule, martial law. And it is something that the army would once again contemplate, but for the fact that it brings a lot of disadvantage to it, because when things start bad, then people start blaming the army. So the army came up with a very nice solution to this, which is have a civilian government up front, do the ruling from behind, that is, pull all the strings. So, for example, this year, the army got a 25% raise of salaries. This is apart from the massive amounts of lands that they get. They have business empires which are unparalleled in the world. So you would expect that an army would be mostly concerned with fighting wars, but not this one. They make sugar and cement and ice cream, and they have housing societies and insurance companies and banks and run beauty parlors and whatnot. So to maintain that business empire, they need a civilian facade, and Imran Khan is the perfect man for that because he's ideologically very tuned with them. He's, as I said, very pro-Taliban, anti-India, and unwilling to challenge authority as solid and as high up as the Pakistan military.
It's just a very sad story. Okay. Well, was he legally elected? I mean, legitimately elected. I just wonder how much opposition there is in Pakistan to the rule of the military.
That's a good question. For a while, it looked as if the opposition was getting its act together. So there are the major parties. There's the Pakistan People's Party, which is Bhutto's party. And then there was the Pakistan Muslim League, which was headed by Nawaz Sharif, and which for a long time dominated Pakistani politics. People's Party earlier, then PML later. And then there was a resistance, people's resistance movement It is called the Pakhtun Tahaffuz Mahaz, PTM, which was basically young guys, Pakhtuns, Pathans, who had been very badly affected by by the army's war on terror, because they had been bombed together with the Taliban, and their villages had been wiped out. They were made to go through checkposts and humiliated at every point. They joined up with the major political parties to create the Pakistan Democratic Movement, PDM. But it fell apart, internal weaknesses, whatever. And so now it looks as if this government, the present one, is going to be with us for a while. Can't say when it'll go, but yeah, it's going to be here.
With real elections. I mean, fair elections. They've been elected, really.
No, they haven't been elected fairly, but now that they're in power and they have the complete support of the army. In fact, Imran Khan every other day says the army and and I are on the same page. In fact, you will see that when some foreign dignitary comes to Islamabad, there is on the streets these big posters, and on the posters is, of course, Imran Khan, the foreign minister, but also the chief of the army, General Bajwa. And so this is telling you, this is just one of the things, he's on every committee. Economic planning, COVID, etc., etc. What's a general doing over there, you might ask? But yeah, that's the way it is. You see, the army says the civilians are incompetent.
Well, that's a different conversation. There's certainly some civilians that I know who certainly are incompetent, including not just in Pakistan. But that's a whole question about where democracy is going, and I think it's going down the drain pretty much globally, and that's a whole different conversation. Let me move back a little bit, because you were talking about some young men, Pashtuns. That's not the word you use, but that's what I call them. Yeah, Pashtuns. And they had been bombed. Now, tell me, because I'm not quite sure, why were they bombed? Because I thought basically the Pakistani army is not interested in suppressing Taliban movements inside or outside of Pakistan. So who bombed them?
Okay, so let me step back into history. 1979. So I'll just take a couple of minutes to give you the background so that it becomes clear. Okay, so 1979, the Soviets walk into Afghanistan. That's the time that the United States comes here, and together with the Pakistani intelligence, the CIA organizes that great global jihad, the one that brought Osama bin Laden to Afghanistan as well. 1988, the Soviets are defeated. And I think 1992, the Soviet Union crumbles, whatever, gone. But Pakistan didn't send those jihadis back to Egypt, to the Central Asian republics. It kept them here in Pakistan, and it helped them to take over Afghanistan. So the Taliban had been formed by that time. The Taliban took over Afghanistan and formed a government there in 1996. Committed a huge number of atrocities, stopped women, destroyed women.
Another linguistic question here. To what extent would you say the Taliban was the further extension of the Mujahideen? Would you?
Okay, so the CIA and the Pakistan intelligence, they recruited fighters from all across the Muslim world. So they came from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, from the Central Asian republics, from Turkey, from everywhere. Okay, plus of course those who were from Pakistan and Afghanistan. So with the end of the with the retreat of the Soviets, then okay, there was the question what to do with these fighters. Well, the U.S. just walked away. You know, it said, "Okay, we're done with, and bye bye. We won the war." And then, well, the Mujahideen started fighting amongst themselves. Now, from the Mujahideen came a branch, which was the Taliban. So you could think of it as a Delta variant of the
Okay. Okay.
of the Mujahideen. And then that further morphed into those who were from the Islamic State, but that's later. Al Qaeda then came into existence as well. And the attack on the World Trade Center, 9/11, 2001, that refocused the United States upon Afghanistan. And they came back huffing and puffing, we'll blow this whole thing down, and they did. But and they also said we're going to now civilize Afghanistan. We're going to make sure that there's democracy here, that these Islamic extremists never again prosper here. We'll bring education and women's rights and all that. And look, it didn't work, and it didn't work for multiple reasons. And you got to ask Donald Rumsfeld why this happened. Lots of other people too, of course. But the point is that now, 20 years later, the United States is completely defeated on the battlefield and is going back, and it doesn't care one damn bit about what's going to happen to the Afghans over there. So much as I don't like the idea, I'm absolutely appalled by the idea of the United States being in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere in the world. If you break it, then you make it. And the US broke it, and they just walked away. And now I'm very worried about.
I'm really glad you're mentioning that, because frankly, I think that's a conversation we're avoiding here. You know, and I'm morally myself really torn, because it is certainly clear that people have created a catastrophe, and then there are other people who are going to have to put the whole thing back together again, the pieces, but then, you know, I think, well, what more could they do? What if you were in charge of fixing it now that it's been broken? What would you do, Pervez? I wouldn't know how to fix Afghanistan.
Meta, you're asking me a very difficult question, but let's say that I was running the US after, let's say, after 2001. First of all, I wouldn't have invaded Afghanistan without getting UN sanction. I would have tried to break the link between the Taliban and Al Qaeda, and I would have used other ways. But let's say that the invasion had happened. Okay, people were very, very angry after the World Trade Center. But then at that time, it was necessary to build up the Afghan army at a time, and it would have worked because the Taliban were in disarray. Instead, what happened was George W. Bush goes and invades Iraq in 2003, 2004. And that takes all the energy and the attention away that enables the Taliban to build up. And look, the invasion of Iraq was complete fabrication. We know that there were no weapons of mass destruction there. There was no Al Qaeda in Iraq. That was a complete lie. What Colin Powell did with his famous sheaf of papers, it was appalling. Okay, now, if you're asking me to fix it at that time, yeah, it was fixable. Was it fixable in 2014 when Obama said the US is going to start pulling out? Becomes more and more difficult with time. But look, with Biden, I wouldn't have done it so abruptly because there are responsibilities. If you've put so many millions of people, women in particular, at risk, well, then you have a moral responsibility to pull back, but pull back slowly. Don't pull back in a way that invites catastrophe.
Oh, I don't contest a thing you said. It's absolutely true. And I just wonder how much longer one would keep it. It's sort of like the boy with the finger in the dike. I mean, how long can you just keep a finger in the dike, and that how much is that doing? You know, it's not fixing anything. And is anything really fixable in Afghanistan? I mean, not, let's say what you're talking about is keeping them from attacking and killing all the people who've taken a different position, or all the women or whatever. But that's not fixing it. Is there any fixableness there whatsoever?
That's the wrong question to ask. You can never fix something. You can prevent catastrophes from happening. But if you're asking me, is there a way to fix Afghanistan? Is there a way to fix Pakistan? Is there a way to even fix the United States? I don't say that that's ever possible. You have to prevent the worst from happening. That's a minimum position that I think we need to keep in mind. The US lost a lot of money. It lost a few thousand men. But what's going to happen now, I fear, is going to be awful for Afghanistan. Look, when the Taliban took over in 1996, people remember, that it was the Bamiyan Buddhas, 2,000-year-old Buddhas, which were blown up by the Taliban. Sure, that's a crime that stays in people's mind. But what they've forgotten probably is that there were bodies hanging from lampposts over there. Women were whipped in public. There were decapitations. There were amputations. It was the most primitive and savage return to medievalism. And what I very much fear, is that that's going to be repeated again. Because look, these Taliban are fundamentally barbarians. Yeah, they are. There's no other way. There's no other word that I'll use other than that, because they are fixated on imposing 7th century laws in the 21st century. Afghanistan's doomed, I fear.
Well, damn it. All right. So we've come to an impasse in our conversation, because I have to agree with you. It looks that way to me. The people that I talk to, a few of them say they don't think that necessarily they will recapture Kabul. What difference would that make if somehow the government stayed in Kabul and the rest of the country was taken over by the Taliban?
Well, Kabul is, of course, a big city, but it's just a tiny it's just one city of very many in Afghanistan. It's the cities that the Taliban are now aiming for. Now, there are some people who are a little more optimistic than I am. They say that the cities will be able to hold out, that the people over there are rallying against the Taliban. They'll pick up arms and they'll fight. And if that is true, then yeah, maybe. In fact, what one could hope. So let me tell you that the Taliban is a Pashtun movement. Pashtun, Pathan, Pakhtun, they're all synonymous with each other, okay? But there's a group of people over there in the north, they're called Hazaras, Hazara. And facially, their features are quite different from those of Pathans, Pakhtuns, whatever. And so they're the target of immense racialism. If they get caught, they get slaughtered. It's true in Afghanistan, it's also true in Pakistan. In fact, just a couple of months ago, 3 months ago, in fact, I'd gone to that part of Pakistan called Balochistan and met with them, miners, coal miners. They've been surrounded by these fanatics. And by the way, those were Islamic State, not Taliban, but Islamic State and Taliban are like, ideologically that way. Heads cut off.
My God. These are the coal miners or Hazara.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, let's talk of more pleasant things. This is too ghastly. I'm just so terrified of the Taliban taking over Afghanistan. By the way, I should say that there is a branch of the Taliban. It's called the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which means Pakistani Taliban. And they had taken over a part of Pakistan known as Swat, SWAT, and they had imposed their laws over there. And so it used to be a very beautiful place, but they took over it and they hung people from lampposts, and there was blood and all over the place. Women were confined to their homes. And they also shot Malala.
Yes, that's
These are the
Valley, isn't it? Swat Valley, is that?
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. Now I have to tell you something personal. So Imran Khan and I were on television together.
You were? Really? Okay.
And this was a major, this is an evening talk show. And the host asked Imran Khan, said, what's going on over there? I'm talking of 2008, right? So that's, 13 years ago. So he asked Imran Khan, what's going on over there? There's so much killing going on. So Imran Khan says, oh, what else do you expect? Look, the Taliban are fighting the Americans. When America invades a country and rapes it and drops daisy cutter bombs and so on and so forth, don't you expect resistance?
Wait a minute, the Americans weren't in the Swat Valley, were they?
Quite so, quite so. So then the host turns towards me and says, Dr. Hoodbhoy, what do you say in response to what Mr. Imran Khan has just said? I said, look, I don't really understand what he's saying, because if the Taliban want to fight the Americans, they should go to Afghanistan. Why are they killing our policemen, blowing up our schools, killing our people? So Imran Khan then turns to the host and says, Hamid, that's the name of the host, Do you know Pervez has been appointed as America's national security advisor in Pakistan? God, I said in Urdu, bakwas, which means that's crap. It's a total lie. And I was very expressive because, look, if you are pointed out as an American agent, you
You get killed.
get killed. So I was very expressive then. I said it's an absolute, total, monstrous lie. So Imran Khan gets really angry. He gets up with his fist like that and he comes towards me. He throws off his mic and he comes towards me. I got up. Look, I can box. By the way, that's on YouTube. You can go search for it. You'll
Wow.
find.
Wow. Oh my God. Oh.
I won't bore you with the rest of what happened, but anyway, that's the point is Imran Khan will defend the Taliban no matter what. So when they attacked churches and mosques and Shia mosques, Imam Bargas, not on one occasion did he ever criticize them. He would always say, yeah, it's the Indians who are doing this, it's American agents who are doing this, it's everybody in the world except the Taliban who are responsible. That's why he's called Taliban Khan.
Okay, tell me who they are still. That you described them as having morphed out of this group of foreign, not mercenaries, but I guess similar in that they were ideologically rigid Muslim young men who came to fight from all over the Muslim world. To what extent are they still composed mainly of foreigners? And to what extent do they have a real base in either Afghanistan or Pakistan among the population?
I think it pretty much fizzled out maybe 10 years ago. So earlier on, Al Qaeda used to be very strong. Then later on, the Islamic State, or Daesh as it's called, that used to be strong. I think that with the combined efforts of the United States and the Pakistan Army. Now, look, the Pakistan Army is split on this, but there's a part which was allied with the United States and so allied against Al Qaeda and Taliban and so forth. There's another part that was helping them, so it's a little more complicated than I can fully explain right now. But anyway, in response to your question, I'll say that the foreigners are gone, that it's the Taliban who are now the native Pashtuns, Pathans, whatever, who are on the Afghan side. But the interesting thing is that there is, as I was trying to tell you, a Pakistani Taliban movement as well. And they don't have a hope in hell of winning against the Pakistan army, but they are attacking the Pakistan army. So December 16th, 2014, so that's 7 years ago, they attacked the army public school and they killed the children of the Pakistani army officers. 130 kids butchered by the Pakistani Taliban. So it's a very odd situation that here you have the Pakistani state supporting the Afghan Taliban, but telling the Afghan Taliban that don't tell your ideological brothers, that is the Pakistani Taliban, to attack us. They're playing with fire. They played with fire early and they've gotten burnt, but they're doing it again.
All right, that really complicates things in my mind. Now let's go back. I interrupted you when you were about to explain something about these young men who'd been bombed by the Pakistan army. That are they the people we're talking about now? That these are people who joined who I was confused about having been attacked by the Pakistan army, and I'm still a little confused about the extent to which the Pakistan army is internally divided, because if many of them are pro-Taliban and many of them are anti-Taliban.
Okay, so let me clarify a bit. Okay. So the Pakistan army wanted and still wants strategic depth in Afghanistan, which is why it wanted the Taliban to control Kabul, because the Taliban, being very energized Muslims, would naturally support Pakistan against India. How does India come into this? Because in the Afghan cities, there's quite a bit of the population there, which, in spite of being Muslim, Afghanistan is 99% Muslim, but in spite of being Muslim, they're happier with India than with Pakistan, because India's given aid, and they say Pakistan just gave us the Taliban and so forth. Okay, so Pakistan wants strategic depth in Afghanistan. That's why it sent the Taliban there, helped them, armed them, etc. Then things started getting out of control. 9/11 happened. Then came the drones. The Taliban were located in the forward areas, in the tribal areas of Pakistan. And these now had become Taliban infested. They would live with the people there. They'd force the people there to give them shelter and food and so forth.
Sorry, now are these like Balochistan and Waziristan?
Yes, yes. And what is called the Federal Administered Tribal Areas, FATA. So all along FATA and Balochistan, you had large numbers of Taliban fighters, and Al-Qaeda also very much there. The drones would come, they'd throw their Hellfire missiles, and very often I don't know about very, but often they would kill innocents as well. Okay. Now things started getting out of hand, and the Pakistani Taliban were attacking the Pakistan army. So then the army used a very blunt weapon. It started using artillery and airstrikes upon Pakistani tribesmen. That generated that huge anger among the young people, which then became the PTM. They're saying, you can't bomb us, we're your citizens. You bombed our villages. You did it because earlier on, you, the Pakistan army, had sent the Taliban to inhabit our villages. You had harbored them there, and then later on, to get rid of them, you bombed them. So we are the victims. We are caught in the crossfire.
All right, now let me get, this is so confusing. Excuse me. Now, these drones were Americans trying to bomb Taliban extremists in Pakistan, or shoot them. I mean, bomb them maybe isn't the word. And then in response to them, the Pakistan army kills their own people. This makes no sense. Am I misunderstanding what you said?
Okay, so it is a fact that Taliban leaders were killed by US drones inside Pakistani territory. So there's absolutely no doubt that there was a large number of Taliban within Pakistan who had been um, armed and trained and given security, basically, so that they could continue fighting in Afghanistan against the Kabul government there. Now, they integrated themselves with the local population as well. And so the local population, when I say local population, I mean not all of them supported the Taliban. Maybe some did, but a lot of them didn't. But then, after the army public school incident, then the Pakistani army went whole hog, and it started bombing using artillery, and said, we're just going to wipe these villages out of existence. So it was a scorched earth policy. They wanted just everybody out of there, because you can't go from house to house and check who's with the Taliban and who's not.
Wow, all right. Okay, now we're back to where I got confused first. Confusion number one was about these young men who joined a political group, having been attacked by the Pakistan army, even though they were not Taliban, right? Okay.
Right.
And are now what's happened to them? Are they? You were about to tell me something about their role in politics about an hour ago before I kept veering off.
Okay, so the short of it is that there are a bunch of progressive young men among the Pashtuns who say that we are fed up with the indignities that we have to daily suffer. When they are in their villages, they're checked by the Pakistan army, they're treated as terrorists, and they say that we want dignity. And so they started a movement which was non-political, just asking for dignity and their rights as citizens of Pakistan. And so that has been considered a major threat by the Pakistan army, which feels that this can spin out of control. The army is unwilling to look at its own role, which has been duplicitous. It has encouraged the Taliban on the one hand. The Afghan Taliban are much beholden to the Pakistan army. On the other hand, the Pakistani Taliban, it's called the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, I mentioned it earlier. The TTP is out to attack the Pakistan army. The Pakistan army says that's because India funds the TTP. I mean, who knows? May or may not be true. After all sorts of alliances can be made. But the long and short is that there are two Talibans now, one which is taking over Kabul, the other which wants to take over Islamabad but doesn't have a hope in hell. All they'll do is terrorist attacks within Pakistan and make life hell for us.
And neither one of them would be good guys whatsoever.
Neither of them is a good guy. They're all bad guys.
Is there any, I'm just thinking in terms of, is there any way to subvert the Taliban or any movement really? If these guys, it looks like they're going to be really running things. Is there any way to undermine them, their policies, and weaken their commitment to their medieval values? Is there any way to soften them up, to civilize them? Is there any hope of, if you can't defeat them on the battlefield, can you do something in the marketplace or in the bedroom or in the the poppy fields, or is there any place where they have any vulnerability?
Okay, so uh, the Taliban, there are the fighters on the ground, and then there is the Taliban leadership, and nobody quite knows how much distance there is between the two. But the Taliban leadership has now looked at the world and seen the creature comforts over there. They would like they would like to have televisions in their homes. They would like the internet, which they had once upon a time banned. They are now allowing photography. Once upon a time, taking a photograph could get you killed under Taliban rule. Some of them are saying that we will allow women's schools, girls' schools. Others are saying no. Some are saying that we will not insist upon every man having a beard, but we haven't heard too much of that. So maybe in time, some of the rougher edges will get softened. They're reaching out to countries around them, in particular to China. That's very interesting because China, as you know, is much more important now in this part of the world than the United States is. It's got a lot of money to give.
That was on my agenda next, to talk about relations with China, but there's not a lot of time for that. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so look, Afghanistan's got $1 trillion of minerals within it, and China is eyeing that. The US very much wanted it, but it didn't get a chance because there's fighting over there. So China would like peace in Afghanistan so that it can rip those minerals out of the soil. Well, I don't know. They're going to give various inducements to the Taliban. Will that soften them? I don't know. And by the way, Iran has a very complicated relation with the Taliban because the Taliban are Sunni, Iran is Shia, and lots of Shias got butchered by the Taliban the last time. But being so much anti-US, Iran has been pretty supportive of the Taliban in recent, yeah.
I'd heard about how they were kind of a potential force against the Taliban, but so I didn't know that there'd been any change there. But now back to where you were talking about China's influence then. I mean, we can hardly call China good guys, but at least they allow people to take photographs, etc. They're not medieval. They're, what they're doing with the Uyghurs is pretty horrible. But are there influences going to be, on the whole, modernizing for, if they have any influence on the Taliban? Would you say they would press for any kind of liberalization of normal old-fashioned values?
I have a very clear answer to that. The answer is no.
Really?
China rigorously stays away from influencing social policies in any country. So for Pakistan, it just keeps away from national politics, so far as we can see. There is no Chinese cultural influence in Pakistan. All it wants from Pakistan is that it supported militarily and helped this Belt Road Initiative, the BRI, which in the case of Pakistan takes the form of CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Cooperation. And so China has very clear material interests in Pakistan, but and it completely stays away from telling us whether we should have democracy or be nice to our women, or do this or that. Nothing social. And I guess it'll do the same with Afghanistan. As long as the Afghans, the Taliban, allow it access to the mineral riches of Afghanistan, they say, we don't care what you do.
Okay, let's talk about India then, because the one thing that is the most quiet is I never hear anything about India's position in Afghanistan. I don't, maybe I'm just not listening, but I don't hear it. What does that mean?
India is chummy with the Ashraf Ghani government. That's the government in Kabul, and it would be, I think, severely disadvantaged should the Taliban take over Kabul. And they are certainly not happy about the fact that the Taliban have been scoring victory after victory, because these are, after all, Islamic fundamentalists and very backward ones. And India does see them as a danger. Nevertheless, India has inducements to offer as well. And so it has opened up talks with the Taliban. So you can ask, what inducements does it have? There's a fair amount of economic development that's happened in Afghanistan, which owes to India. So hospitals and roads, these have been constructed with India's help. And so they are hoping that a Taliban victory will not result in an ejection of India from Afghanistan. Why they want to be to have influence in Afghanistan, you'll have to ask them. But
Well,
I
do
guess
they show any interest in having influence? I mean, that's just something that I don't hear.
Sure they do, because
We hear
if
about
that interest
Pakistan.
wasn't there, they wouldn't have spent so much money and had so many.
Mhm. We hear people talk about how Pakistan practically owns Afghanistan. I mean, the Taliban is just so, that's the impression I get, is that it's a very blatant, partnership. But I don't hear about India. And I also don't hear really about what China is trying to do, if anything, in Afghanistan. They're just there for the minerals then, or that's what they want. Is that all they care about? Or do they have any? I mean, you got
Two things.
Support from China to Pakistan. You got some kind of, I have this impression that the US used to provide a lot of military supplies to Pakistan and got sort of sore over the years that Pakistan wasn't playing ball. And therefore, you get most of the Pakistan military supplies mostly come from China now. Is that correct, or is that not?
It's correct, except for the very high-tech stuff which we still get from the United States. So look, we'll have to go back to the Cold War. Pakistan was one of the frontline states against Chinese communism and against Soviet communism. Well, the Soviet communism collapsed, so there wasn't much to do there. But then Chinese communism turned
into
in a different direction.
I would say it's a capitalist society. Very simple.
Yeah. Although there's a communist party there, but so China's interest in Pakistan is economic, but it's also strategic, because it now has access to a port which opens up, which is located on the Persian Gulf, and so it gives China a way to reach from its Xinjiang province to the Arabian Sea, or rather the Persian Gulf. And so it's both of economic and strategic importance. it could very well be that this will be a Chinese naval visiting port in years to come.
What's the name of this port?
Gwadar, Gwadar.
Okay.
Okay. So in terms of Afghanistan, now you got to realize the geography is that nothing gets into Afghanistan from the sea except what comes through from Pakistan or from Iran. From Pakistan, it's the shorter route. And also now earlier on, Afghanistan could get goods from India, which went from India through Pakistan to Afghanistan. Well, that's been closed for a while.
Right? There's what is the name of that road?
Well, it was the Grand Trunk Road, but now there's a motorway and yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. Okay, I deflected you, okay. Well, all very complicated and our time is up. And
okay.
we haven't even talked about nuclear weapons. Your specialty. It's a tragedy having a conversation with you and not talking about nuclear weapons, but we'll have to do it a different day. And I don't think they've gone away. My impression is that you folks in Pakistan still have a handful of these little toys.
We love them.
It's been very good. Thank you so much, Pervez. You've put my head spinning. This is all very hard to absorb, but it's as clear as anybody could make it, I think, under the circumstances.